So let's talk about circular flow of income in a two-sector economy. Okay, circular flow of income in a two-sector economy. Just to make it very simple, that is why. So especially when you're thinking about GDP, just to explain the gross domestic product. So consider the goods and services that are being traded for money. So we'll take up only those goods and services that are being traded for money. Is that right? So, talking about that, economists, what they do is they simplify life by saying that households directly or indirectly own all the resources or factors of production of a society. So, factors of production are land, labor, capital, enterprise. So they say all this is who owns it? The households. HH. Households. So the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. So they are owned by households. So households can be made up of one person or several individuals or families. So just to think, just to make it easy. And then you have what are the firms. Talking about firms, they buy or rent factors of production from the household and use them to produce goods and services, which are then sold back to the households. So goods and services, they use these services, factors of production services, the firms use them, and they return them to the households as goods and services. They're sold back to the households. Households need that. They need goods and services for survival. So this process sets up a circular flow of resources moving from households to firms, and of goods and services moving back and the other way, which I'm going to show you. So if you're not considering the goods and services, now we can think about the money. If you think the circular flow in terms of money, then what is it? This was goods and services. So firms use the services of land, labor, that is factors of production. Can you see that? Factors of production, which are owned by the households, and they make goods and services, and they sell it back. They send the goods and services back to the households. Now, talking about money flows. So what happens? What happens here? So moving opposite to the flow of resources and goods are payments in money. When firms buy factors of production from household, they have to pay money to the household, and that money is what is known as factor incomes. So when they are buying land, labor, capital, enterprise, they have to give them. All the factors have to be paid, which is known as income to the household. And when the households buy goods and services, so when they're buying it in terms of money, they pay money to the firms to buy the goods and services. So that is their expenditure. So in short, if you're talking about income and expenditures, what happens? Like households own firms. Firms don't exist on their own. As a result, any money that a firm receives when it sells a good or services flows on as income to some individual or group of individuals. Because of this, income have to be equal to expenditures. And also any resources that the firms own, land, factories, mines, and so on, households also own, because households own all the firms in the economy. Thus, all income generated by selling resources to produce goods and services flows directly or indirectly to households. Just try and understand this. Now, let me draw a diagram just to make it very clear. And while I draw the diagram, see, these are the household, this is the household, and this is the firm. Okay. Now, well, this is a model of a private closed economy. So, in the figure, I'm going to show a circular flow of the two-sector economy. So, let's just take the household and the firms. Okay. Now, households give factor services to the firms. So, what do? They give factor services, as in land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So, they are giving these factor services to the firms. Who? The households. Is that clear? So, land, labor, capital, enterprise is provided by the households to the firms in a two-sector economy. Okay. So, now firms, when they use for production land, labor, capital, enterprise, and they produce goods and services, which they are going to give back to the households. So, goods and services that the firms produce will go back to the households. Is that clear? So, these are also known as factor services and goods and services. We'll call it real flows. So, they are known as real flows. Right? So, real flow is the final goods and services flow from firms to households when they produce, and the households give their factor services to the firms. So, nothing is free now. Now, we're going to talk about money. So, these are real flows. Let's talk about the money flows. Right? So, now we are going to talk about money flows. So, I'm going to talk about money flows in a two-sector economy, households, and these are firms. Now, can you tell me how? Well, when factor payments flow from firms to households for their services, rent, interest, wages, and profit. Okay, so when when the households gave them factor services to the firms gave them wages, rent, interest, and profit, that is factor incomes. So they provided factor incomes to the household when they got their factor services. Right? They had to pay it. Nothing is free. Do you agree? Okay. So this is known as a money flow. And what happens is, when they are buying goods and services from the firms, so what do? That's expenditure. They are spending on goods and services which the firms had provided to the households. So whatever purchase, they're purchasing the goods and services from the firms. So you see the circular flow is complete. So I can also ask you, okay, so once again, so firms pay households for the factor services as wages, rent, interest, and profits, and the household purchase goods and services from the firms. Yes, that is the money flows, is spending some dollars or rupees or whatever the currency, they're spending currency. So this is what it is. So these are the money flows. So you can get a question. Come on, please write down 2 questions. One is, what do you mean by real flows, and what are money flows? You can pause the video and write the answer, and you can consult your NCERT books. Now, there's another question that I would want you to tell me. What do you mean by a factor market, and what is a product market? Okay. So what is a factor market and what is a product market? Let me explain a little, then you can write the answer. Okay, let me talk about factor market. What do you mean by a factor market? Again, 2-sector economy, household and firms, just to understand. Okay, you have the households and you have the firms. Now, when the households give factor services, their factor services provide factor services, or their factors of production to the firms, that is land, labor, capital, enterprise. Well, that is the factor market. So, and when the firms provide incomes, I mean when they are making factor payments for the factors that they have received as wages, rent, interest, and profits. Is that right? So this is a factor market. What is a factor market? Factors of production given from households to firms as land, labor, capital, enterprise, and factor payments that are made in terms of wages, rent, interest, and profits. That is the flow is complete. That is a factor market. So factor services, factor payments. That is your factor market. Alright, so now we're going to talk about product market. So let's talk about product market. Again, a circular flow, households and firms. Okay, so what is a product market? Flow of goods and services. Those are the product. So flow of goods and services from where? From the firms to the household. Goods and services that flow from the firms to the household, and the households make, what do? They don't get it free, right? They are making payments or expenditure payments for goods and services. So the payments made by the household to the firms, or the expenditure incurred by the household while buying goods and services, that is known as the product market. So product market, you have again circular flow, households and firms. Is that right? So basically this is it. So factor payments flow from, we talked about we've talked about the real flow, we talked about the money flow, we talked about the product market. This is the product market, and we also talked about the factor market. So now please write down these definitions, and you've got to make these diagrams too. Okay, and basically just get a 1 mark question or something. It can be even a true and false and something like that, but you have, your concept has to be absolutely clear. Okay, or you can get a 3 mark question as explain the circular flow of income in a 2-sector economy. Okay, so that's it. And if you consider, there can be another question. Just let me, what is the importance of the study of circular flow of income models? So they basically, it is that they're helpful in understanding mutual interdependence. With that, you come to know that everything is mutually interdependent among different sectors. So circular flow models help us to understand the mutual interdependence among different sectors of the economy, namely what are they, household sector, production sector, government sector, whatever. And then you have, it's important for the estimation of national income. Circular flow of income facilitates the estimates of national income. There are 3 phases in circular flow of income, that is production phase, income phase, and expenditure phase. Accordingly, national income can be measured in 3 different ways: as a flow of goods and services produced, as a flow of income, and as a flow of expenditure. And then of course, you sort of understand what are leakages and what are injunctions and all of that. That is injections into the economy, and what are the leakages. And now that we're going to do in a different section, maybe in the next class. Okay? So homework you must do. So that's the money, the real flow, factor market, and product market. Okay. So see you in the next class. And again, let me tell you, I have covered this long back. Maybe if you just go back, maybe 2 years back or 3 years back, perhaps. I think it was way back in 2020. All from NCERT and my notes. Well, this is something like revising. Somebody asked me the other day, what is product market, etc., and that's why I'm doing it. So see you in the next class.